Good evening. I'm Sarah Abushark, and this is the Capstone proposal for Psychology 698, titled Psychological Pathway Narrowing Among Professional Women in Middle Adulthood. The core question is whether two normative developmental processes of middle adulthood, generative concern and occupational future time perspective, independently predict leadership aspiration among professional women aged 35 to 50. The workplace data established the scope of the problem. The 2025 Women in the Workplace report from McKinsey and LinkedIn, drawing on 124 companies and roughly 9,500 respondents, shows a consistent aspiration gap between men and women. The aspiration gap is widest at the entry level, where 69% of early career women want to be promoted compared to 80% of their male peers. At the senior level, the gap is 84% of women to 92% of men. Standard explanations like inflexible workplace policies, pay inequality, and the broken rung account for part of this picture, but only partially. The remaining gap invites attention to mechanisms specific to middle adulthood. Carr's 1997 analysis of the Wisconsin longitudinal study confirmed that aspiration trajectories carry developmental weight for women's well-being, and that observation motivated the developmental framing of this study. Cross-national evidence strengthens the case for developmental interpretation. Reichert and colleagues in 2007 compared Germany and the United States and found that both countries institutionally reproduce what Morn and Röhling in 2005 termed the career mystique, the cultural belief that continuous full-time employment throughout prime adulthood is the expected path to success. Both countries institutionally reproduce the career mystique despite operating under markedly different welfare state arrangements. Structural protections alone cannot fully explain a pattern that crosses settings. Age-graded developmental processes complement the picture. Lachman and colleagues described midlife as a pivotal period where growth and decline intersect, and Inforna and colleagues extended this with motivational shifts that cannot be attributed to structural context alone. The theoretical architecture has a clear hierarchy. At the macro level, life course theory frames human development as the product of interlocking age-graded transitions, historical context, and linked lives. Nested within the life course framework and serving as the primary theoretical anchor is the gendered life course perspective. The framework holds that careers are gendered pathways by social clocks, linked lives, and historically embedded scripts. The career mystique is a cultural template built around continuous advancement that was constructed around a male life course. Central to the gendered life course framework is life course fit, the degree to which a person's biography aligns with available institutional pathways. When biography misaligns, the motivational consequence is aspiration contraction. Generativity and socio-emotional selectivity theory are nested as supporting frameworks within the sections introducing each independent variable. The first independent variable is generative concern, which is grounded in Erikson's 7th stage of psychosocial development. Erikson proposed that middle adulthood is organized around whether the individual will find meaningful ways to contribute to future generations. McAdams and de Saint-Avant operationalized the construct, distinguishing between generative concern, the internal psychological state, and generative action, the behavioral manifestation. The present study focused on generative concern because the hypothesized pathway runs through the internal reorganization of goal priorities. Empirical findings on the developmental timing of generative concerns are mixed. McAdams and colleagues reported significant midlife elevation in the second administration of the LGS, but not the first. Zucker and colleagues documented that perceived generative concern is significantly higher in midlife than in young adulthood, with women in their 40s reporting greater generativity than women in their 20s. McAdams and Logan described the mechanism as a reorganization of goal priorities, in which professional goals organized around individual advancement grow discoordinate with a self-concept reorganized around contribution and legacy. A 2021 meta-analysis from Javad and colleagues confirmed that generative concern predicts mentoring, knowledge sharing, and pro-social workplace engagement. Generative concern will be measured using the Loyola Generativity Scale, a 20-item instrument with alpha coefficients of 0.83 to 0.84. The second independent variable is occupational time perspective, grounded in socio-emotional selectivity theory. The theory proposes that motivational change in adulthood is driven by the subjective perception of how much time remains, not by chronological age. When time feels expansive, goals emphasize exploration and future-oriented investment. When time feels limited, goals shift toward emotional meaning and present-centered experience. Safa and Fers extended this framework into occupational contexts, proposing two distinct dimensions. Remaining time captures how much time a person perceives as left in working life. Remaining opportunities captures how many professional opportunities remain. Each dimension independently predicted work motivation and career behavior, so both subscales will be entered as separate predictors. Koich and colleagues demonstrated that OFDP predicts within-person change and growth motivation over time, consistent with age-graded shifts in motivational orientation. Rudolph and colleagues' meta-analysis confirmed associations between OFDP and career motivation, developmental activity, and workplace behavior. Koich and colleagues' broader meta-analysis confirmed associations with achievement-related outcomes across diverse occupational and life domains. The dependent variable is leadership aspiration, framed throughout as psychological pathway narrowing to emphasize its developmental character. Pathway narrowing is defined as a contraction in the range of professional goals a woman perceives as both possible and worth pursuing, occurring in the presence of demonstrated competence and without a self-identified structural barrier as the primary driver. It is distinct from three related constructs: career plateauing, voluntary downshifting, and burnout. Pathway narrowing originates in the motivational reorganization Lachman and colleagues describe in midlife. O'Neill and Villamoria's three-phase model of women's career development positions this contraction within the pragmatic endurance phase, during which women redirect achievement motivation toward mentoring and collective contribution rather than individual advancement. Leadership aspiration will be measured using the leadership aspiration subscale of the career aspiration scale, developed by Gregor and O'Brien. The scale was originally validated on undergraduate and graduate women, and applying its leadership aspiration subscale to midlife professional sample extends its psychometric reach. Hypothesis 1 predicts that higher generative concern will be directly and independently associated with lower leadership aspiration among professional women aged 35 to 50. This reflects the developmental proposition that as generativity becomes the organizing concern of midlife, professional goals emphasizing individual advancement begin to feel discordant, with a self-concept reorganized around contribution and legacy. Hypothesis 2 predicts that a more constrained sense of remaining occupational time and opportunity will be directly and independently associated with lower leadership aspiration. Both predictions rest on the same developmental premise that the motivational shifts normative to middle adulthood contribute to aspiration contraction in ways that hold across structural contexts. The study uses a cross-sectional correlational survey design. Participants will be women between 35 and 50 years currently employed full-time in salaried office-based or knowledge work roles. The sample is restricted to women because the model is grounded in the gendered life course framework, and because the CASR was validated specifically with women. Recruitment will proceed through online communities and personal networks, including Mothers in Tech, Ex-Googlers Network, DSN Soko WhatsApp, and expat professional communities, which together capture participants across multiple national contexts. The target is 120 participants. A G-power analysis indicated a minimum of 77 to detect a medium effect at 80% power, with three predictors at alpha 0.05. Data will be collected via Google Forms. The survey includes the demographic background form, the Loyola Generativity Scale, the OFDP scale, and the full career aspiration scale revised, administered in that fixed order. Estimated completion time is 10 to 15 minutes. Data handling will follow the APA ethics code. Analysis will be conducted in SPSS version 31. Preliminary analysis comes first. Data will be cleaned prior to import into SPSS. Cleaning will include checking for completeness, removing duplicates, identifying out-of-range values, and flagging outliers. Descriptive statistics will be calculated for all study variables, including distribution, central tendencies, and variability. Demographic data will be reported descriptively to characterize the sample and examine for potential covariate relationships with the dependent variable. Assumptions of multiple regression will be examined through residual plots and variance inflation factors. The primary analysis is a simultaneous multiple regression. The dependent variable is that leadership aspiration subscale of the CASR. 3 predictors will be entered together: the LGS total, the OFT remaining time subscale, and the OFTP remaining opportunity subscale. Results will be reported with the standard regression statistics. If the obtained sample falls below 77, 3 bivariate Pearson correlations will be reported in place of the regression, with a Bonferroni adjusted alpha of 0.17 to control family-wise type 1 error. Results will be represented in 2 tables and 2 figures: a correlation matrix, the regression results, a histogram of leadership aspiration scores, and a scatter plot matrix of predictors against the dependent variable. This study contributed to current knowledge in 2 specific ways. First, it extends socio-emotional selectivity theory into the work context by examining how occupational future time perspective relates to leadership aspiration in midlife women, a population underrepresented in the post-2015 literature. Second, combining the Loyola generativity scale, the OFTP scale, and the career aspiration scale revised within a single sample provides a developmental design that has not been previously assembled. Here, please find my references. Thank you for your time. I welcome questions on the study, the framework, the method, or the plan of analysis.